Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Noah Adelman, founder and president of Game Trayz, the industry leader in custom board game inserts. Their inserts are featured in popular games such as the Grimm Forest, Parks, Wingspan, Vindication, My Little Scythe, and many, many more. Noah, welcome to the Binge. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on here. I know you're very, very busy. There are tons of games that have the Game Trayz system, so I don't know how you keep up, but I'm sure you're a busy guy. So I just thought we could get started and really just give us the history of how Game Trayz started. So I think just from your social media, which is quite strong, a lot of people have seen Game Trayz kind of show up in games here and there, a lot of Kickstarters and so forth. But as I was digging back, I really couldn't find the genesis of how this all started. So I thought you could maybe start us with kind of what's your background? Like where did this whole thing start?
So I'm an engineer by study. So went to University of Missouri and an electrical engineer, computer engineer, started an internet business right out of college, did that for 10 years, always loved board games. So board games were great. This was like during, this is during, Twilight Imperium, where we played that every week, and there's so many pieces, and there's just baggies and baggies and baggies. It's got to be a better way, right? And some of the games at the time had inserts, but they were always like last minute decisions, it seemed like, and they didn't fit everything correctly and didn't help anything in the gameplay. So I'm like, yeah, one day I'll figure out a way to make a better Plano box, right? So the Plano box was kind of what we used back then. It's tackle box for fishing tackle. Let's figure out a way to put it in there, and it'll fit great. Well, good enough, but the lid will come up a little bit, but it's better than 1,000 baggies. So that was 10 years after college, and then during my stint making my business in internet, we had a client, Miniature Market, which was an online retailer here in St. Louis, which is where I live. And we were doing their marketing. And once 2008 hit, there was a little bit of a slump, as everyone knows.
Yep.
And I decided to go full-time Miniature Market to do their marketing. So I was in charge of all their marketing, online marketing, for a year, and basically ramped them up towards the success that they see today. So after I did that, then I worked for a thermoforming company. So that is the process of making trays, thermoforming, which is vacuum forming. So I took the love of games, the industry knowledge that I learned at Miniature Market, and then the year of working at a thermoforming company designing packaging, which is really what most of the time is what vacuum forming is used for. And luckily enough, the owner of that company let me use all of his equipment after hours.
Wow.
And that's when I started thinking of, okay, let's make a tray for, at the time, the hottest game at the time was Terra Mystica.
Yep.
And Terra Mystica has a thing called favors in the game. And there's basically a 12 separate favors that you have to just lay out on the table every time you play the game. So 3x4 grid, stack them up. So either you put each individual stack in a bag and then set them out, or you put them all in one bag, and then when you start the game, you have to sort them and put them on the table however you want in the order, so that when you're playing the game, you can look at all of them, choose them, and play the game. So the first tray was a favor tray, I called it, and it was basically just having all those favors in the right order, in the right stacks, with a lid. So whenever you played it, you pull the tray out, took the lid off, and now all your favors are ready to go, which saved 5-6 minutes of time, but made the game that much more playable because you didn't have to worry about doing that one small aspect of setting up the game.
So was it more of a personal, like, so when you made this, was the first version you made more for self-use, or was it right away, look, I got an idea here, maybe I can create something I can sell?
Yeah. Well, the process of thermoforming and making trays, from what I learned working at the thermoforming company, uh, basically taught me that it's not something that's quick to market. So it's not like a wood insert where you can have an idea and just have a laser cutter, laser it out and see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, okay, throw that wood away. Let's try adding a couple more millimeters to this side, and now it fits, great. But with thermoforming, you have to make an actual mold that is just like making a mold for a miniature. So those, as most people know, are expensive. And if you don't do them yourself, it's not cost effective to try and try and try for something that's just an accessory, which is why at the time having that access to the equipment and the knowledge was, key to making the business start. And the Terra Mystica, and then Euphoria, and then Brewcrafters and Eclipse at the time. Those are all the hot games at the time. And my relationships with Jamie Stonemeyer or Segmeyer, who lives in St. Louis, also kind of
saw the opportunity.
that game.
Yeah.
And then, so after that, I got my own equipment in the garage and then did everything myself in the garage. Made the molds, made the trays, shipped them out. That was the start of Game Trayz.
Wow. And when you first did that, like there would be, obviously you have to cover off the cost of that mold. So when you're doing the math on the kind of that first entrance in, like how many of these did you figure you were going to have to make just to break even?
I didn't think of that really, because it's a cheap process once you have the mold.
Yeah.
So if you do the mold yourself, which it requires a fairly expensive piece of machinery,
And being an engineer.
and knowing exactly knowing how to use it and making the mold, that's why molds are expensive, because they're hard to make, right?
Yeah.
So if you can do that, you can take out that cost, and that's the only way I was able to start the business. A mold for a tray, let's say, what was the tray you brought up earlier that
Well, here's even a tray right here. I'll little
Yep,
plug there
exactly.
for Mike Bruner, our
Great.
producer. He did the Queen Bee game, which I just recently got my copy this week, and of course
Great.
it was got a little Game Trayz logo on it there.
Exactly. So those are
Yeah.
two separate molds for that one tray.
Yep.
And those molds, for instance, if you were just to have one of each, the lids and the base, right?
Yeah.
Which is not normally how you do it. But those molds separately would probably be a couple grand each. But normally you make a mold that has 5 or 6 of the same mold on it.
Yep.
So then when you do a vacuum form one shot, we call it a shot, you make 9 of them, for instance, or 12 of them.
Right.
So when they come off, they go on down the line, they get cut out. So now you're making 12 at a time, which obviously makes things go faster and cheaper. So the mold for that one tray was probably would have cost $8,000-$10,000 if you had it made in the U.S. At an actual tool maker that specializes in that. And it's not that it's not worth it, it's just that it's a very hard thing to do. And if you don't know how to do it, which many people don't, and you have to have specialized equipment, then that's where things start to get out of control. So if I wanted to do an aftermarket tray designing company, I would have to do that myself. And otherwise, it would not have made sense.
And then as you've kind of moved along, and this has evolved where you've got, I guess, what we call the aftermarket version of the trays, or the X-Trayz, I guess, which people can use to organize their own games, or, take Acquire would be a good example of this. I've got the game Acquire. It drives me bananas every time I play it. I love the game. I open up the box and it's like, did they hate me? Is that why the box looks like this? Because it is a disaster, right? So having some kind of organizing tray would be great. What percentage of the business would you say now has gotten to be aftermarket versus included in games from when they're first manufactured?
Right. So there was a definite shift. So once I started selling a lot of those aftermarket trays for the hot games at the time and making them myself and shipping them out. Then I started going to Gen Con and had a little small corner of someone else's booth that they let me borrow. And I had my little trays there. And someone walked up and said, "Hey, I like these trays. They look cool. Do you want to, you've ever thought about doing a design for the game right off the bat?" I'm like, "Sure, why not? Sounds great. That's what I'm doing already. You want to have a meeting?" So next morning, we have a meeting at the hotel lobby, and he's like, "And here's an NDA." Okay, why?
Yeah.
Whatever. He's like, "Okay, I work with Riot Games. We do the video game League of Legends." And I'm like,
Wow.
"What's that?" Because I didn't even know that League of Legends existed at the time. I was a World of Warcraft guy, but I never, because after World of Warcraft, then straight to board games.
Yep.
I didn't know that League of Legends grew so big. And he's like, "Here's the game." And I told my buddy afterwards, and he's like, "What do you mean League of Legends?" Like, "League of Legends from Riot? You know that's the highest grossing video game in the world right now." I'm like, "No, I did not." So that it turned into Mechs versus Minions tray, which took about a year, not only just for me, but a year of tray design and their own game design. But that kind of started my career in designing 4 games out of the
Four
bat.
games, yeah.
And then
Kickstarter,
that kind of,
yeah.
then the retail went down and the custom went up.
So is it like a 50-50 split now, or like 80% initial into the game and 20% aftermarket, or how's that split work for you?
Yeah, so right now it's definitely a lower percentage on the retail,
Yeah.
but now that we've made a base of custom stuff, we're starting to add more back in the retail stuff, the aftermarket things. So coming up with trays that help games specifically or generally, like the X-Trayz, but we're trying to push that more, actually.
Yeah.
So, or it's just hard to find. We did a couple over the last few years of the Terraforming Mars. Obviously, it was a perfect storm of great game, everyone has it, but really bad components.
Yeah.
So we made a tray that was basically a replacement for the player mat, and that was a great success. And then Small World, which has a lot of copies out there and everyone loves, we made a tray that helps the gameplay set up really quick for that. Another 15-20 minutes of time saving. So you're going to play Small World way longer or way more often if it's not going to take a half hour to set up or find all the pieces.
Is there any systems that you've done for a game just because the game is a mess and you knew that the game needed a system, where you've done it aside from working with the actual company? And then how does that work? Did you have to work in like licensing or anything like that? Or how does that work?
Yeah, pretty much all of our retail stuff or aftermarket products are games that we liked.
Yeah.
But also that we knew, well, 2 things. We liked the game. There's a lot of copies out there. There's a lot of people playing it. And it really would benefit greatly by having something set up quickly, or to change the dynamic of how you set it up, put it away, or in play game, or how organized the table was when you're playing it. Anything that would greatly reduce the hurdle of wanting to play that game that night.
Yeah.
So those are hard hurdles to overcome. But as you can see on the website, there's a few.
Yeah.
And we also have a few that are games that we've worked on custom for the publisher, but also there's previously copies of the game that people might want, the trays that already own the game, or that only bought the retail version that doesn't come with the deluxe trays. There's a lot of different ways we work with publishers.
Has there ever been a publisher say, "Hey, wait a second, you went and made an organization system for our game, and we want to be part of that," or like those discussions ever happened at all, or has it usually been pretty cordial?
There hasn't been many retail, or I keep saying retail, but it's
like publishers or whatever. Yeah.
The aftermarket world. We're not as deep in the aftermarket world as a lot of the wood insert people are. So, there hasn't been that many, and we have asked for permission, and no one had any problem. We're not putting, sponsored by Terraforming Mars, or it's just an accessory like an iPhone case, but it's only on a small handful of games. But we haven't reached out. It's like I said, it's harder to get those products to market.
Yeah,
which is why the custom side has grown over the last 3 years. But now we have more time to work with that and figure out, okay, what games are good, what games are people playing, what games really need something, and then come up with it, because we can't just say, here's a design, let's test it out and print it and see if it's good and then reprint it. Because if you make a mold, so here's an example. Here's a mold for the X-Tray.
Yep. So for people listening, it's like a reverse of an actual tray. Yep.
This is the mold that makes this tray.
Right.
So in separate pieces normally. So the lid would snap on here, base. So it doesn't. Go ahead.
So this is because it's an audio podcast as well. Just for listeners who are maybe not watching, he's holding up a mold. It has both the base and the lid that clip onto the same mold. Right? Is that kind of how that works?
Exactly. So it doesn't clip on, but it's formed on this mold. So it's normally, if for the people who don't know how thermoforming works, it's not an injection molding where the plastic is melted and then
laid over top
pressured into the mold. It's just a sheet of plastic in the correct thickness and correct color already, and it's just warmed up to a flexible state. And then this is the mold. If this was the mold, the sheet would be here, and then the mold would come up, and the vacuum would turn on, and it would suck the plastic down to the mold, thus creating this tray on here, which is basically just the plastic vacuum formed to the mold. And this is already trimmed, but normally it would be, in a sheet already. It would be in a full sheet, and you'd have to trim it and cut it, just like a cardboard is made.
So how many projects are you working on right now? Like it's obviously a lot of work to create these, but given the number of trays I've seen out there on different games, at any given time, how many projects are you guys working on concurrently?
Custom projects, 40.
Wow.
Different states, just because we have so many different states that people want to work with us and that we can work with them.
Yep.
So pre-campaign, is it a retail project, direct to retail? Is it a Kickstarter campaign? Have they already finished the Kickstarter campaign and they found out about us afterwards? Belle, what are you doing? Oh, Belle, come here. Come here. Hold on one second, guys. I'm sorry.
So those are listening to the audio podcast. We got a dog in the background.
That's Belle.
Let's go for a walk.
She was sleeping on my lap the whole time. Maybe you didn't even see her. And then she's like, I want to go. So different version, different times that we work with them. So if you are a publisher, a new publisher that has never made a game, and you saw us and your campaign was going to be in 6 months, we can help you there. If the campaign is in a week and you finally found out about us and you want trays, we could work with you then. Or like with Grimm Forest with James Hudson, it was a 4 months after the campaign ended and he was about to go to print, and the production company at the time sent him a tray.
Yeah.
He was like, what the heck is this? This is not going to work. Then he called me and let's just delay the whole production for this kind of thing. So we
And it worked
started,
out well. I mean, even in the
yeah,
lobby here, we've got several people just saying how impressed they were with, you got Allison, we got Mike, you got others saying how impressed they were even with that when they opened up the box, and it's like a wow factor, right? With those organization trays.
right. And that was after the campaign tip.
So as you've evolved, you've now you're no longer actually making the physical trays yourself now, right? You guys have kind of evolved to more the design side. And then how does that work? How does that coordination now work where you're doing the design, but someone else is doing the manufacturing? And then how do we get that into the game? And how does all that work now?
So on the custom side, where we work with publishers directly, we also work as a third, basically like a third party to the publisher and the production company. So we know how the production side works and the publishing side works. So it's we take the publisher's ideas and our ideas on how we can make something great for the game, and then once we have that, we can translate it into the engineering terms that the production company can use. So we've worked with over 20 different production companies, and some more than others in the board gaming industry. So we've trained basically all these production companies how to make the trays that we design really well and up to our standards.
Is there certain ones you'll use, or like, so for instance, I mean, I did a game, a couple of years ago, and most of these Chinese manufacturers that I've seen are more kind of project managers, right? So they're
Sure.
pulling in pieces from different factories in the area. So in this case, how do you organize that communication so that you're pulling the for that piece, the thermoform pieces that are coming in into that game that's being assembled? Do you get in direct contact with the thermoformers, or is it more the project management company that you're talking with, or how does that play out?
Yeah. So the two, like you said, they are a lot of times outsourced from the project managers in China, a lot of the different companies that we work with. So that is actually good for us in a way, because they are good at what they do and they know how to thermoform and they know how to make tools. So if we can deliver a mold that is properly designed for tooling and for the thermoforming process, China has been very good at those, taking the file and making it correctly, if you know what I mean. So if you send a file that says, hey, make this, the tooling company in China, most of the time can make this perfectly because this is what we wanted, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not, just like a miniature, right? If you say, I want the miniature to be like this, and the sword is like, bent like this,
Right.
You're not going to talk to that tooling company, and that's a tooling issue. So tooling companies in general are very specialized and can make tools if they have the file that is designed to be tooled correctly with the machines that they have, and then that tool is designed to then utilize correctly the process that whatever you're doing is doing, whether it's injection molding or thermoforming, which is two different ways to design. So there is some learning to teach people on the different production companies, but once or twice they start to understand and know our standards, and so it's a challenge. So we don't have any contracts with any production companies specifically. So we tell publishers that we're working for you and you choose your production company, but here are some production companies we know will work well for you. That kind of thing.
And I'm curious. So I've got, holding up here for people just listening, we can't see, is from the Queen Bee game again. I know I'm just excited because I got it this week. Yep. We got this little mini. And then, so how does that process work? Do you get the 3D models and you base your mold off the 3D models, or do you have to
Yes.
get all the minis first and then you can kind of work it out, or how's that come together?
Yeah. So when we design a tray that holds minis, most of the time we don't have the actual minis,
Right.
and we don't really need them to start the design of the process. Uh, the process to make the cavity, we call it,
Yep.
to hold the tray, to hold the mini. But we need the final production version, like this, just to basically measure to see
Yeah.
if what they sent us is what we actually got. But it's harder. We don't have to like scan this in basically. So we just take the model
Right.
that they're making it from and then import it into our software, build the cavity around it, and know that this is going to work. And that normally doesn't have an issue unless something really drastically changes on the mold that or the mold of the mini that we didn't know about, which happens. But we know about how minis are formed and have a certain percentage of shrinkage
Yep.
based on in different directions based on the plastic that they're using. So we know that if this is the mold, it's going to be 3% skinnier this way and 2% skinnier this way, and we figure that into how we build the cavity.
Have you ever run into a case where things didn't fit afterwards? So everything theoretically should have worked out, but then when you get the actual pieces, is something changed in the process that somebody didn't tell you, or something happens where it didn't fit? And in that case, what did you guys do?
Yes, most of most of the time it's all because they changed something that we didn't know about.
Yeah.
And the minis aren't as big of an offender as the cardboard actually.
Yeah.
So
It comes in
cardboard
thicker.
itself, yeah. So cardboard in general is uh, GSM, I think is the word that they use,
Right.
which isn't an actual measurement. It's of distance. It's a density measurement.
Yeah.
So you, a 2 millimeter cardboard may be 2.1 millimeters. It may
Yeah.
be 1.6 millimeters. It may be 2.4 millimeters. It all depends on the humidity and
It
how
swells too, right? Like it can swell.
exactly
Yeah.
the humidity can swell it, or the dryness can shrink it, and it can still be the same GSM. So that's why with cardboard specifically, we make sure that we get a white sample of the actual cardboard they're going to use
Yep.
right before they go to production, because especially when you have a tray that is going to hold, let's say, 20 little tokens in a row, right? If that's 2 millimeters and we're expecting it to be 2 millimeters, we make a nice little channel for it. If it's great. If it's dry, if the plastic or the cardboard that they use is overly dried, now it's 1.6. Now, when you take 20 of those chits in a row, 1.6 will bring the whole stack down by an inch, maybe,
Yeah.
or even worse, bigger. So if it's too humid,
doesn't fit.
2.2, now you can't fit those in. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the inserts that come with the games, other than Game Trayz, sometimes are just like a little too tight or a little too loose because they don't do that final check. And it's not their fault, really. It's just the tray is always the last thing you have to do.
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure that uh, everything is final, but also that's the same time where everyone's like, we're already late, let's get it out to market. So we have to wait to the end to do the tray, but it's also at the time where maybe most people are late to delivery. So it's a challenge.
So what's the next on the horizon for you guys? What are you working on? What's the, is there any new innovations you can tease about? Like I know you got the X-Trayz, which is the aftermarket trays. Again, really, really cool. We showed them online while we were talking here, but is there anything else you guys are working on? I know there was a drink trays you guys had at one point too, I think, right? So Spilly Willies like myself, you got something to hold the drink from going all over somebody's game. What else are you guys working on?
Yeah, drink trays are going to be coming to market for sure. They're great. They're two different sizes, one for a bottle or a Red Bull can and one for a regular can or a pint glass. Those are cool. And we're going to expand the X-Trayz line. So not only are we going to have different colors and different configurations of 3 and 2 or different ways, there's going to be ones that are bigger, they can hold cards. So we're looking into that and definitely expanding all the new games that are hot to make them better, kind of like what it started with 5 years ago,
Well, that's
before
awesome.
all the custom stuff.
For anybody out there that says, why would you need a drink trays? Let me tell you firsthand, I was at a game night about 6 months ago, 8 months ago. It's before COVID. And one of the players had come to this meetup group and brought this brand new game, like literally took the shrink wrap off it at the table, set it up, got everything set up, said, hey, you want to play? I said, absolutely. Just let me get my drink. Went, got my full pint of beer, sat down at the table. As I'm sitting down, I hit the beer and the beer went like just drenched this person's new brand spanking new game. I ended up buying him a new game because I felt so bad, but it happens all the time. So it's cool to see something like that.
It's right here. It's right here.
Oh, he's got to show it. There, he's back. So this is basically just a pop can, and there's a Red Bull can that he's got. And there is a thermoformed little thing. It just looks like a little mountain, but it's cool. It certainly will stabilize that drink, keep it from popping over, and keep you all stabilized. That's awesome. So if people want to find your games, how your trays, how do they find your trays? If somebody wants to go and buy one of these aftermarket trays.
GameTrayz.com.
GameTrayz.com. That's Game Trayz with a Z.
Exactly.
Or Z, depending which country you're in.
In addition, you can also buy all of our aftermarket products on Board Game Geek's web store.
Yeah, I saw that as well. There's quite a robust selection there. And then if there's a developer or publisher out there who's got a game coming up, either in Kickstarter or just they want to go straight to retail and they want to include your designs in there, how best do they get in touch with you? Same
thing, Board Game Geek, geez. GameTrayz.com.
GameTrayz.com.
There's a link at the top for custom trays.
Okay.
There's a little form to fill out. In addition, there's another form for any retailers who want to carry our aftermarket trays in their store.
That's awesome. Well, Noah, it has been a pleasure. This time goes by laser fast. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Hopefully we can get you back again in the coming months when there's another game coming out. And man, I look forward to seeing these trays. They're awesome. Congratulations again.
Thanks
all right.
So much.
You take care.
Nice
Cheers.
talking with you.
Ciao.